Welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Selling Sanity, The Troubled Teen Industry, The Insane Profits, and the Kids Who Pay the Price. No other than Dr. Corey Jentryi.
Hello.
Welcome,
Thanks so
welcome.
much for having me.
Welcome, Dr. Corey. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. So I am Dr. Corey Jentryi. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a triple master's PhD from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And my book, Selling Sanity, is a combination of a memoir composed of a sort of anthropological and sociological deep dive into the macro and unit side economics of the troubled teen industry as I've defined it and as it relates to the United States of America.
Dr. Corey Jentryi, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The title suggests the industry is selling sanity. What is the fundamental marketable lie about troubled teens that these programs are built upon?
I would say that the biggest deception or deceptive practice that these programs operate off of and that they really try to pitch to people is a combination of a couple things. One is it really capitalizes off of crisis situations. So individuals that are in crisis situations that are experiencing major life turmoil with either themselves or someone that's very close to them or means a lot to them, i.e. their children. And a lot of that is kind of manipulated and used in exploitative measures to get individuals to sign up and send their kids to these programs. And the biggest sales pitch that they give is that it's a couple things. One is that they sell you on this notion that we get you, like we get you because we are you in one way or another. And this is very common with a lot of the kind of 12-step recovery narratives that get brought up within those treatment centers, and they're kind of the founding ideologies of those treatment centers. And this sort of almost anti-scientific premise that, evidence doesn't really matter. What really matters is personal experience and, the ability to identify some aspect of my story with another aspect of your story. And really what the selling sanity component is that they get these families that are in crisis, and most of them just are trying to do what they think is the best thing for their kid and save their life in that moment. And what they end up getting is not sanity or any semblance of behavioral health or anything that's sustainable to the adolescent. What they get is a lot of they end up doing a lot more harm than they do good. So they sell this idea of sanity and salvation, really. And then, families are often fitted with a really hefty financial bill. And most of the time, their kids come out in a lot worse shape than they did when they went in there.
Dr. Corey, how does the drive for profit directly corrupt the therapeutic process that lead to the systemic abuse you document?
Yeah, well, the drive for profit, a couple things come along there. Is I'd like to first start the conversation with a bit of a caveat, is that I'd like to let all the listeners and potential readers of the book know that I am not anti-treatment. I'm not anti-therapy. I'm not anti psychiatric hospitals. I'm not anti-psychiatry. I'm not anti any of that stuff. What I am anti are fake experts, and I'm anti exploitive and taking advantage of people, exploitive methods and taking advantage of people that are in very vulnerable situations. So I'd like to kind of preface everything I say by that I make a big point in the book to make a big distinction between the industry and professionals that are in the industry, or just professionals that kind of operate around the industry. So there are very good people that are doing God's work in the profession of mental health, like psychiatrists and certain therapists, but there is a very real marketization and kind of industrial push on behavioral health services now. And anytime that individuals can make a lot of money off of helping vulnerable populations, there's going to be exploitation. That's unfortunately just the history of the world, the history of societies, and unfortunately, in the kind of hyper-capitalist world that we're now living in, it's people are usually kind of a byproduct, or they're seen as the product. So and once those kind of market forces and kind of economic variables get involved in healthcare, particularly in vulnerable populations of healthcare, like young, mentally unstable children or older geriatric populations that are, aging and experiencing cognitive decline, or just substance abusers and individuals with very acute mental health illnesses. They're very vulnerable, and they're very dysregulated, and they're also very hard to treat. Like, even under the best of circumstances, they're hard to treat. And what these treatment programs have found out is that you can charge a lot of money, a hell of a lot of money, to individuals and families for services. And once that starts happening, if you're a therapist and your livelihood, say, is individual clients that you have one at a time, and you're charging $500 or $300 or whatever a private pay fee for a therapist might be, it's not a hard stretch to think like, oh, I'm getting paid $500 an hour to go see this person. I'm going to start thinking of ways to make myself indisposable to this process. And if that person has $500 a week that they can spend on therapy, then absolutely, I think I'm going to see them once a week, even though a lot of research and data is out there that proves that oversaturation of certain types of methodologies and modalities has a null effect, and sometimes can have digressionary or regressionary effects on the individual. Despite that, you get market forces that come in, and just good old fashioned greed. And that's not to say that everybody in the industry does that, but that it has become so prevalent and apparent in the industry that it's moved well beyond this notion of, oh, it's just a few bad apples. And I'll give you an empirical set of evidence on that I talk about in the book, and kind of unpack in other talks that I do, is that if you look at what we spend in the United States collectively on healthcare every year, it's between, depending on the figures and stats, it's between like $3 and $5 trillion a year. So that's a lot of money that is spent in the United States for healthcare. Only about 3% of that spending is distributed to or allocated towards behavioral healthcare and addiction. 3 to 5%, it depends on what stats and what numbers you look at, but it's somewhere between like 3 and 5%, maybe a little bit higher on some of the stats that we spend on behavioral healthcare spending. So in the big scheme of the $5 trillion a year that we spend on healthcare, the little 3% that we spend on behavioral healthcare, 5% or 6%, is, kind of a drop in the bucket when you think about it in relation to like what we spend on cancer research or what we spend on this or that. However, an interesting preface with that is that despite this only accounting for about 3 to 5% of the total healthcare spend budget, this little 3 to 5% sector accounts for almost 20% of all of healthcare fraud. So that gives you kind of an idea of the ecosystem that a lot of this stuff is taking place in.
Dr. Corey, how do these programs use fear, guilt, and desperation to market themselves to vulnerable parents? And what language should parents be most wary of?
Such a great question. I would say first and foremost, they utilize a combination of I don't know a better way to describe it other than it's a brilliant combination of, they use the honey and the hammer, if I can use two terms that kind of seem completely divorced from one another. But a lot of the language in the beginning is very welcoming. It's very empathetic. It's very, we get you, we understand you, we know what you're going through. It's very relational. And people like that. There's a sales technique in that, where people like to spend money or give services or whatever to individuals that they like, the people that make them feel good about themselves, or whatever. So they get these families that are in these very vulnerable situations. A lot of them have kids that are, in various stages of behavioral health disorders. Most of them are teenagers. I would say 80%, 70% of them um, don't really have major behavioral health disorders or substance abuse problems. They maybe are having like uh, symptoms that resemble someone that might have be having a breakthrough mental health episode or a breakthrough kind of substance abuse episode. But a lot of what these individuals are experiencing, particularly kids, is just the slings and arrows of adolescence. In my case, I can speak personally from what it was for me. Is I was already a troubled kid to begin with. I came from a troubled family. My mother had major mental health and emotional problems. She was suicidal. She tried to kill herself numerous times. There was a lot of violence and aggression in my home. I already kind of came from a troubled environment. Now, you take that kind of environment, tack on extreme poverty, which my family was very poor. We lived in trailer parks. Often things like, what are we going to eat were big concerns, in my family. And there were, numerous times where we go to the grocery store and we go to pay for the groceries, and the clerk or the checkout lady at the grocery store would be like, "I'm sorry, sir, you don't have enough money in your checking account to buy all of this stuff. So you're going to either have to put it back or, you know, take only what you need." So, in those types of environments, you add that in with being a teenager, which is already a very strenuous time from a developmental, from a psychological, and from just a social standpoint for any human being, boy, girl, or what have you. And so I was already troubled, and they were very warm, and they were very welcoming, and they were very. It was very seductive in my case, and they use attractive people. They know how to say the right words at the right time, the right thing. They really know how to kind of put their hooks in you emotionally, and then there's kind of a switch once you're in and you've kind of signed on the dotted line. Then it becomes a game in a lot of programs of emotional manipulation is really what it boils down to, because at that point they see you as a mental health patient that's in treatment. Therefore, you're a troubled or dysfunctional or mentally unstable, or they use a variety of different adjectives to describe you to both yourself and your family members. And really, in my case, it was a system of really breaking down self-confidence, and somebody like me, when I came in, I was already from a poor family. I'd been bullied. My mother had abused me, blah, 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 blah. So I already had a ton of insecurities and a ton of emotional problems and hangups from these types of, situations. And then you get these programs that come in and they're like, "We love you. We're going to save your life." And the most important thing is they're like, "You are really sick." Those were words that were said to me often. They were like, "You're really sick. You're fucked up. Forgive my language. You're just crazy. Your mind doesn't work right." What's another little saying that they'd be like, they have these little like one-liners that are quite funny sometimes, like, "Your ego is not your amigo." A bunch of little things like that that sound kind of funny and are relatable, but really what they do is they make you doubt your own decision making, and they make you doubt your ability to think for yourself. They make you doubt your ability to make decisions for yourself, to trust your own intuition and emotional and moral compasses in situations like that, because you're sick. And really, they're like, your mind is the problem. Therefore, you can't trust any of your thoughts. Therefore, you need to run everything by us in order to have us take care of these things. And then as soon as there is any kind of pushback, whether that's from family members of questioning the methods of like, "Hey, we don't really know if this is working," or, "Hey, our kid seems to be getting worse, not better," or, "Hey, this seems a little out of the ordinary," or just a simple like, "Hey, this is fucking crazy. Like, what are you guys doing?" They typically flip that around quite quickly, and then they make you the problem. And it's like, "Oh, well, what's going on with you?" And it's almost like a jujitsu measure that they utilize a lot with therapy, where they start taking what is supposed to be a therapeutic process that's supposed to actually build you up and teach you how to think for yourself. And they start using it in a more subversive and manipulative method where it's like, okay, we're going to start using this therapeutic method to teach them what to think. And if there's any pushback on their methods, on what they're doing, how they're doing it, it's usually reframed in a way as of like, oh, well, your kid is really sick, or they're very troubled, or you can't trust them because of X, Y, and Z. And this very real fear that a lot of parents have, that like, hey, your kid could die if you don't listen to us. And there's sort of a very subtle but effective messaging within that, that's like, and if your kid dies, it's not going to be our fault, because obviously we're the experts here and we know what we're doing, but it's going to be your fault because you keep getting in the way and you won't listen to us and you won't buy into us. So for families and individuals that feel as if they're extremely dependent on these programs and these circumstances, because they create very real senses of urgency. I mean, some of it could be from extraneous circumstances, but a lot of these programs are like, you need to come in, you need to come in now, you could die if you don't come in, like, all of that. And they get, kids and their families to quite literally drop everything. I mean, in my case, I was 15 years old, and they didn't have to talk me into this very hard, but they talked my parents into completely pulling me out of school. So I stopped going to school when I was 15 years old. I got rid of any curfew or any kind of social or regulatory restraints, for lack of better words, that my parents could enforce on us. And they were like, look, you just need to hand them over to us completely and listen to whatever we tell you. I've found, and I think a lot of other people have found, that type of method, one, it's not very effective, and two, it tends to do a lot of damage to kids. But it's very effective in terms of creating a sense of urgency and getting these kids that, if they think like, oh my God, if I don't listen to these people, I'm going to die, or these families that are like, oh my God, if I don't listen to these people, my kid could die, the thing that I love and care about the most. That's a pretty compelling sales pitch, you know?
Definitely. And Dr. Corey, as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Oh, such a great question. Well, my short term goal was, as an author, I think as any author, and this would go with an academic author or a nonfiction author or a fiction author or a poetry writer, you name it, is I think the goal of any author when they start something is to, please finish this thing and get it over with. And whether it was my PhD dissertation or several of my master's dissertations, or other books or literature pieces that I've worked on, or articles, it's always kind of the same thing. My short-term goal is to just get this thing done. So I achieved that, and I'm very happy. I guess my next goal is to promote the book in a way that's productive to getting, one, a more male-focused survivor story out there, because the industry, there are a lot of survivor stories out there, and they're all great and they're all very necessary. But I just noticed that they're overwhelmingly female, and it's an overwhelmingly female voice and a female audience that are talking about these things. And I know firsthand, and through a lot of interviews and a lot of interactions with a lot of kids over a lot of years of studying this stuff and working in the field, that men suffer, and men suffer significantly, particularly young boys in these types of behavior modification programs. So my other short-term goal and a longer-term goal is to really just raise awareness about this, to educate families, to educate academic institutions, to educate schools, to educate counselors, and quite frankly, to educate therapists, because there are a lot of individual therapists and psychiatrists, for that matter, that are really completely divorced from the behavioral healthcare industry. They have their little private practices or offices, and they kind of, they're all on their own little, practice islands doing their thing, and they do amazing work. And we need more and more people like that. But a lot of the professionals in the industry are really unaware of the tactic. I mean, they have, some knowledge, but my goal with the book long term is to really raise a national awareness, particularly in the United States, about the really epidemic that this has turned into. Because we talk about having a behavioral health epidemic that's going on in the United States. There's some truth to that. There's certainly like a rise in mental health issues and a variety of different behavioral focused disorders that are happening here, as well as substance abuse and addiction. But a lot of it is being quite frankly, it's just hyperbolic. You know, a lot of it is driven by these commercial private treatment industries, by this kind of influencer class that has now manifested itself, to use a term from their own parlance, uh, into really kind of uh, exacerbating the idea of this problem, because there is a mental health crisis in this country, but we kind of already know how to treat the mental health crisis that's going on in this country. We just don't really do what we need to do to treat it. And like you know, all things in America, we think that the private sector and entrepreneurship is the answer to everything. And there are some things where that's, you know, a very real and a very legitimate answer. But there are other sections of the economy, and healthcare being one of them, where you know, we don't need more of the private sector. We need more of a public sector and public sector oversight on this industry. So that's my long-term goal. If I can achieve those goals of raising awareness and you know, educating state and local officials on the need to fund community mental health programs in the actual communities that the need is, then I will be a very happy camper in that goal.
Good luck to your goals, Dr. Curry, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you?
Oh, that is another really great question, and I would say that if you want to be don't be like me. Is what I would please don't be like me. I would never recommend anybody to ever be like me. Be better than me. But you know, writing a book or writing anything is, you know, 5% ability and 95% tenacity. So, you know, I tell people what my PhD supervisor told me as soon as I started. I was like, you know, how am I going to finish this? Because in my program and a lot of other you know, elite academic institutions, for lack of a better word, you know, there's it's about a 50-50 shot of people finishing for a variety of different reasons, their PhD or their research. And I kind of think the same stats are applicable to just regular authors as well. And my PhD supervisor said, write a lot and write often. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't necessarily need to be thoughtful. It just needs to be written down. And that is advice that I've adhered to, and has definitely fared me well and fared other authors that I know that are in the same kind of process, because it can be grueling, man. You know, Daniel, I'm sure you know, and your listeners know, it can be the writing process can be very painful. And like I said, it's 5% capabilities and 95% tenacity. So, and in my case, I think it was 1% capability and 99% tenacity.
Indeed, and thank you for that advice, Dr. Curry. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Oh gosh, there are so many books that have influenced my journey and my you know, my recovery journey, my deprogramming journey. Um, you know, on a lighter note, one of my favorite books of all time, and it kind of was the reason that I wanted to write about injustice or notions of injustice, was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. That remains and will forever remain my favorite book. Other books that have inspired me are uh, uh, you know, writers like Kenneth Waltz, who wrote a lot on realism and geopolitics. Starr and Griner, who wrote on boundary objects and notions of utilizing narrative and praxis, or is another author that has really influenced me. You know, there's a really great book by a Zen Buddhist monk named Jack Cornfield, and it's called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And it's, you know, not an academic piece. It's you know, kind of one of these new age spirituality things, but there's a really great message in that book, and you know, that really inspired me. And then oh God, there are so many other authors and folks. It's such a hard question, and I could probably give you a whole show on books that have inspired me and books that I love to read and love reading again and again and again.
Dr. Curry, Thank you for that recommended books. And what would you say to someone who believes these places must be tough, but some kids just need a harsh wake up call?
Yeah, I would argue that there is not a bunch of evidence that supports that. I mean, if our prison system were any example of what not to do and how not to rehabilitate people, this whole notion of tough love, or we just have to, redemption through punishment. There's not The science doesn't back that up. And I think at the end of the day, in healthcare, just like mental health care, psychiatry, any of the science fields, we should be letting the data dictate what we're doing. And a lot of what's going on in the behavioral health space is it's really an anathema to that. And there are there are few and far between the cases that you need to engage in some of the extreme measures that these programs do. Like, yes, there are, of course, very violent children or kids that have had horrible, horrible experiences, or that are just, mentally or chemically unstable in one way or another. And they do need to be restrained. They need to be kept safe. They need to be kept away from other people so they can be safe. Of course, those things exist. And that's why we have lock psychiatric hospitals, and that's why we have a prison system, is to incarcerate and keep people away from other people that they might be able to do harm to, as well as themselves. So we're pretty good on the locking people up side and restraining them. What we're not so good at is the rehabilitation side, and getting people through those periods and out of those periods, so they don't have to go back to those periods or those places, because that becomes a burden on us, on society, on taxpayers, on institutions, like you name it. So, to the people that kind of argue you need the hammer more than you need the honey, I would say to them that the evidence doesn't really back that up. And just from, the experiences and the interviews that I've done with quite literally hundreds, if not thousands of kids over the years, it would prove quite the opposite, actually. That it's kind of like getting someone to be quiet by duct taping their mouth shut. It works while the duct tape is on there, but eventually it's going to come off, and when it does, they're probably going to have something to say about it, and it probably won't be positive.
And before we wrap up our discussion for today, Dr. Corey, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my comedy 101 in, well, second season, I should say, and Food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Corey, if you could leave our audience with one clear call to action, one thing they can do to help end the cycle of abuse, what would it be?
Read my book. That would be my my major call to action. Read Selling Sanity. It gives a lot of personal insight as well as empirical evidence to support the arguments inside of the book. So it's something I've worked very hard at. I put a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears into it. So if anyone has questions or is curious about the troubled teen industry, what to look out for, please read my book.
Mr. Corey or Dr. Corey Jentryi, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for supporting the book, and just really grateful to be a guest on your show, Daniel.
Yes, people. So, Dr. Corey, where do people can buy your book?
You can find Selling Sanity on Amazon in the United States or Canada, anywhere in North America or Europe for that matter. And you can also visit CoreyJentry.com, which is my personal website. There you can get in contact with me, and you can also purchase the book and see some of the other advocacy work and educational material that I provide for families and individuals that are struggling with behavioral health or addiction problems.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Corey Jentryi, because if you support him for sure more and more empowering books like this to come. So Dr. Corey, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.